There yet.
We're not there. Okay.
Yeah, you are going to be starting here. I'm going to play you the weather, and you're going to hear the open at that point.
Your exclusive AccuWeather forecast.
Partly sunny, humid for today, high 85. Tonight, clear to partly cloudy, low 70. Tomorrow, sunshine and some clouds, a high 83, low 68. Clouds and sunshine, less humid Sunday, the high 80, and partly sunny for Monday, high 84. That's your AccuWeather forecast. I'm Andy Robb for AM 860. The Answer.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
All right, Dr. Hott.
This is Dr. Bill, your radio MD, and we're firing nuclear weapons here this morning. I know that people are concerned about this. I guess people are concerned, Joe. I don't know. By the way, Joe's with me this morning. Hey, Joe, how you doing, buddy?
Good morning, Doc. Good to be here with you.
I'm glad to have you. You're a handsome, bright, articulate young man. And
I'll say that your vision is about perfect.
So, I don't know. Are people worried about a nuclear exchange? I mean, we talk about it in the lunchroom, the doctors do, but I mean, that's what doctors do. They talk about diseases and crises and things like that. Is the public talking about that, Joe? Have you heard?
Well, I suppose it depends on who you define as the public. I mean, there's concerns about, all imaginable things that can, fall out from all of this, but just kind of, proceeding through life and interacting with people on a regular basis, it doesn't seem like it's a huge concern. In particular, if you were to compare it to, say, back during like the Cuban Missile Crisis days, or the days when they were doing training drills, to hide under your desk and so forth because the Soviets could launch a nuke. It doesn't seem like there's anything like that going on. It doesn't seem like there's any kind of real major concern like that.
Nope.
But maybe peripherally, I'm sure people are conscious of it that are paying attention to this. But then that's really a better question: is how many people are actually paying attention to this?
Yeah, I don't know, but it doesn't hurt to quickly go over how to protect yourself in a nuclear blast. Of course, get down, get low, and try not to get covered with any fallout dust. And if you do, wash it off right away with soap and water. And, of course, don't touch your eyes or your nose or your mouth because you don't want to swallow it either. A lot of the people that died in World War II in Japan, a lot of them could have been saved if they had known what to do and had our modern technology. And, of course, there's plenty of ways to protect yourself from the fallout after the blast. A half an inch of lead is fairly protective, cuts down on the amount of radiation by 50%. And every distance you move away from the center of the radiation dramatically decreases its effect because the rays, they don't go that far. A lot of the radiation too, Joe, is alpha and beta particles, and if you have on clothes, it'll block those because those are electrons and helium, which is the second heaviest or the second lightest element. Helium nucleus come out, and they won't penetrate even a jacket or a shirt. And so there's a lot of protection, and it takes about 3 weeks, 4 weeks for the radioactivity levels to fall low enough to be safe to go out. And here in St. Petersburg, most of the homes are block. So if you stay inside your house, you got concrete there, you'll be safe. Just stay away from the windows. But, it is a frightening thing to think about, and it's a frightening time. I guess more serious for the Ukrainians, and especially in Mariupol, is the use of chemical weapons by the Russians. And the Mariupol is, if you look at the map, and I've got the map up behind me, let me get out of the way so people can see it. The Black Sea is surrounded by Turkey, Georgia, Russia, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, and this is that little sea that was formed thousands of years ago, I think after some kind of volcanic event, and it's black, and I don't think there's much life in there, but there's a little branch of it up to the northeast called the Sea of Azov, which is the southern border of Ukraine, and that's where Mariupol is in there. The problem that people are having in Mariupol is that they're fairly isolated from the rest of the main army of the Ukraine, but they have the Azov, AZOV regiment brigade, which was a paramilitary group that then swept into the Ukrainian army a few years ago, and they were a right-wing group, and their leader is a self-proclaimed nationalist, and I've heard that he says he's a white supremacist, but I can't find anything in writing from him that says that. So he's actually the offspring of some old Cossacks, and you probably don't know who those are, Joe, but the Cossacks were those were the White Russians. Those were the loyalists to the emperor, or to the Tsar rather, not the emperor. And so the Red Russians were the Bolsheviks, you know, Stalin and Lenin and Khrushchev and those guys. And during their civil war in the 1918, 1920 era, the Cossacks were the ones who fought back against the communists.
And lost.
And lost. Well, you got to remember now, this is a huge area. I mean, you know,
Oh, right.
losing means that you don't have control of the government, but obviously these groups are still around and still active, still forming militias. So at any rate, these are fairly well-trained groups now, especially this Azov Brigade. And they even have a symbol that looks a little bit like a swastika, but it's not. It's an ancient hook that hunters would use to trap wolves. They'd put this hook inside a hunk of meat, hang it up on a tree, and the wolf would jump up and grab it and bite it and impale themselves. And then they'd have the wolf. They'd kill the wolf, and the wolf wouldn't eat their livestock anymore. So they use that, and it's also an old rune, an old Teutonic rune that has some mystical meanings. And so they're kind of into this throwback to the old days when the Teutons were in control in that area, and you know, it goes back thousands of years. So there's, and this is what Putin's talking about when he says there's fascists and taking over the Ukraine, and we have to stop it. And of course, you say fascism in Russia, and that's a major trigger. That's a major button to push to get people mobilized, because the memory of the invasion of Russia by the Nazis in the 1940s is still in their collective memory, and they've kept it alive. You know, they celebrate the big days when they defeated the Germans. We don't really do that much anymore. I mean, we have D-Day and Pearl Harbor Day, but not many people really take notice anymore. It's kind of fading out of our memory, but not the Russians. So they're going after the Ukrainians, and especially they want to get these guys in Mariupol, which is the city on the Sea of Azov, which is at the very southern border of the Ukraine, close to the Crimean Peninsula. And this area is pretty small. The Black Sea is not very big. So you get to the Black Sea by going through the Aegean Sea, which is next to Greece and Turkey. And then you go through the Sea of Marmara, and then through the Dardanelles Straits, and then you're in the Black Sea. And Istanbul, the capital of Turkey, former Constantinople, is right there on the Dardanelles Straits. So this is a hot button area. Now, Putin's talking about possibly using chemical weapons, and they've got plenty. They've got plenty, believe me. I think we still have a few stockpiled, but the chemical treaties, the banning of the chemical weapons in warfare that was signed even by Russia, supposedly had an addendum to it that you would destroy your weapons over a period of time, and we even built special plants on atolls out in the Pacific to incinerate these chemical weapons, because you know some of them are pretty toxic. Some of them will kill you. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the Russians, of course, say they will do something, and they don't. They're also using this new hypersonic, so they say, this hypersonic missile. You know about those, Joe?
Illuminate for me.
The hypersonic missiles are like cruise missiles, but they're instead of going 2,500 miles an hour, they go 3,500 miles an hour, which makes them harder to detect by conventional radar and harder to use anti-missile missiles on, because our anti-missile missiles aren't as fast as those. So they are conventional weapons, you know, 2,000-3,000 pound warheads that are going at 3,500 miles an hour, like a cruise missile close to the ground, hard to detect, and more easily maneuverable than a rocket ship. And so you can deliver more deadly force with less detection and less defensive countermeasures. So they say they've used one in the war so far. I don't know. We know that China has these weapons, and we know that Russia has developed these weapons. We are supposedly developing these weapons, which means we probably already have them, and we just haven't told anybody. The stealth fighters and the stealth bombers, they were developed a decade before the public even knew they existed. So we don't like to tip our hand, which is, that's good poker. You don't want anybody to know what you got. So at any rate, I don't know if we have them or not, but the big thing is countermeasures. Now, we need a better radar system, and one of the retiring generals or admirals a couple of years ago had suggested that we have a space-based radar system. I think that Elon Musk is going to beat us all to that with his satellites that he's putting up for cellular phones and communications. And a lot of that can be tweaked to use to detect disturbances in electromagnetic fields. That's what the Serbians did during the Balkan War back in the 90s when they shot down one of our F-110s, which were not supposed to be seen or identified by their radar. And it wasn't their radar. You know how they did it, Joe? They had cell towers, and they triangulated and they tracked the disturbance in the cell phone tower waves, and they figured it out. And so then they fired and they hit it. They shot down an F-110, our funky-looking bombers that are stealthy, that don't fly very fast, by the way. But so things can be done, but we're just not going to share all of that with the world. And but we do need to be prepared because we don't know how far this is going to go. I mean, I know a lot of people are not worried and they don't think it's going to go very far, but I see this becoming a world war. I hope not. I hope not. The Europeans are notorious for pulling everybody into their conflicts, and that's the way they've been rolling for millennia. They like to fight each other, still tribal. The Teutons and the Slovaks are going at it. And so here you have the Azov Brigade, which identifies as Teutonic, Germanic people, and the Slovaks, the Russians, and Belarus, and a lot of the countries in Eastern Europe, they identify as Slovakians. Now, the Poles, they don't want to be in that camp anymore. And the Czechs and the Slovakians and a whole bunch of other countries, they're all part of NATO now. They're all part of NATO. Well, here's the thing that I'm hearing, and I even heard this on Fox News from one of the reporters, that they said that, well, we have the Monroe Doctrine, so why shouldn't the Russians be allowed to have their own Monroe Doctrine? Well, you don't know what the Monroe Doctrine is if you're quoting it and you don't, and you're not putting it into context. The Monroe Doctrine, Joe, said that foreign European countries cannot come and colonize North America, South America. We'll stop it. Of course, we didn't have the power to do it. Basically, the British were stopping everybody in a bigger part of the 19th century when the Monroe Doctrine was first formulated. That was President Monroe. That was in like 1820. So there was about 60, 70 years where we didn't even have the ships or the power to stop anybody from coming in. And as you know, France invaded Mexico and took that over for a number of years. Mexicans had to fight for their independence from France, just as they did from Spain. But we're not interested in colonizing Europe. We don't want to colonize anything. We're not colonial. We're not a colonial power. Woodrow Wilson changed all that, the foreign policy of our country in the 1914 to 1920 era. He upended the whole Teddy Roosevelt idea of going around the world and imposing our will on people. Actually, Teddy didn't do that, but he made it sound like that. We got involved in the Spanish-American War, but the only property we held onto was Puerto Rico. Everybody else was left to be independent after they were freed from Spanish rule. So there's a lot of misperception and misconceptions about who we are and what we are, and this idea that we're some kind of an evil empire who wants to colonize the world is just crazy. The last thing we want to do is colonize Europe. What do we want Russia for? I mean, we have plenty here, and we don't want to rule over another country. You know, it's a big job going in and overseeing the rebuilding of a country like Japan or Germany after you defeat them in war. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. The Marshall Plan after World War II cost the American public, in today's dollars, hundreds of billions to rebuild Germany and Europe and Japan. And that wasn't a bad thing. I mean, that was a good thing. We did the right thing, and we have an ally and a friend in Germany and in Japan now. But still, it costs time and it costs money. We don't want to destroy Russia. That's not what we want. We want to make sure that Russia doesn't destroy everybody else. Russia would like to, at least Putin and his inner circle would like to reestablish the old Soviet Union. And that included, the Warsaw Pact included Poland and Moldova and Ukraine and Belarus and the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Joe, this is not a good thing. You know, the Russians need to take care of themselves. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been there. I went to St. Petersburg, and we took a tour, and part of the tour is you go outside the city to a little restaurant out in the country. I mean, once you get outside the city limits, they don't even have paved roads. They're gravel roads. And then when you get to the turnoff to go to this little house and restaurant out in the quote suburbs, it's a dirt road. I mean, these people don't even have paved roads, for God's sakes. One of my friends, who was an exchange student in the 60s, we were talking, and this was in the 1980s, or maybe it was in the 70s, but it was back in the old Soviet era. He went to Russia, to Moscow for a trip, and we were talking about the threat of the Soviet Union. He said, "Bill, these people don't even have zippers. I'm not worried about them. They button their pants up." This was in the 1970s, for God's sakes. They did not have zippers. This is now the 11th or 12th biggest economy in the world. I mean, India is 10 times the size of the Russian economy. What they need, they don't need to worry about us conquering them. They need to worry about us not helping them out financially. That's what they need to worry about. But I saw one video clip, and it was a Russian woman, and she was thanking us for taking out all of the junk food, Coca-Cola and McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken, because we're going to make them healthier. And she said, in return, we're cutting off your gas so that you walk and ride bicycles because we want you to be healthy too. And that's friendship. So something good might come out of this yet.
Well, that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. But what about chemical weapons? You know, there's a whole host of them that are dangerous and egregious, and the world has used chemical weapons off and on for millennia, but we've been able to develop some really toxic substances. You know, we've got, of course, ricin. You can make that in your home from castor beans. If you want to get somebody you don't like, you can use that, and there's no antidote for that, by the way. That's not a very nice one. Abrin, brevetoxin, colchicine, digoxin, those are biologics. Then there's the blistering agents like mustard gas and sulfur mustard. Lewisite is another agent that can make your skin blister, but you can also get it inside of you, and it's got arsenic in it. So not only do you get the full effects of the chlorine on your lungs, but you also absorb the arsenic, and then you've got heavy metal poisoning. And then phosgene, these are some of the things that we have to think about. Blood agents, carbon monoxide, cyanide, potassium cyanide, all kinds of cyanide compounds. These things, and remember, the Germans used cyanide to mass murder the Jews. You remember that? They would put the Jews in these rooms. They said, "Here, you're going in for a shower," and instead of water coming out, cyanide components would come out, and that would kill them. And then then they'd empty the room of the gas and go in and clear out all the dead bodies. How can you do that to people? I mean,
Yeah, pretty morbid to consider.
I don't understand the thought process that says you are so inferior and subhuman that we have to kill you and to get you out of our society. It's like killing your spouse when you don't want to be married. Why don't you just get a divorce? It's. I guess.
Well, they did a pretty good job of conditioning the German people into believing the propaganda, and that these really and after enough of that kind of layering on over a period of time, they actually believed that what they were doing was the noble thing, as crazy as that is. But if you have that same message layered on, and then once you start doing it, then you have to kind of justify that you've been doing it, and then that causes you to think even less of these people, because if you're doing these things, it must be because they're terrible people, right? I mean, that's the justification that you're making to yourself. So you're right. It's hideous to consider, and it's something that is very, very foreign to us, in this age that we live in now. But for the people that were going through it at the time, and also part of it is that a lot of these people were kind of faced with the choice of, well, you can either get behind the big power or not, and not getting behind the big power had its own consequences. I'm not justifying anything. I'm just saying there's a reason why people can kind of go down this road mentally and find themselves, engaging in these horrifying practices that you wouldn't even think would be capable of being done just for humanity purposes. But people can condition themselves to it if ladled onto it over a long enough period of time. Very unfortunately.
It's mob mentality, Joe. You have, like one woman said who was interviewed after the fall of Germany, and they were interviewing people saying, "How did you get pulled into this whole Nazi fascist movement?" And she said, "We were hysterical with joy. I was screaming and cheering. I didn't even know what I was cheering for. I didn't know anything about Nazism or fascism. I was just happy that we thought we had our country back." So you get that mob mentality. But I'll say this for the people in Bavaria, they voted against the fascists. They were the one state that did not vote a fascist majority, and heavily Catholic. And they actually hit a lot of Jews, and a lot of the plots to kill Hitler came out of Bavaria. Now, that doesn't mean that they were completely innocent by any means, but you got to remember now, the Jews were basically pacifists, and they weren't doing anything to hurt Germany. They were a lot of the backbone of the industrial and intellectual and healthcare and legal complex of the country. And people say, well, didn't we do the same thing with American Indians? No, that's not true. You got to remember that American Indians were fighting against us from the time of the French and Indian War in the 1750s all the way through our own Revolutionary War and then into the West. And there was a lot of animosity that had been engendered between the European settlers and the North American natives, or whatever you want to call them. Basically, they were Koreans that wandered over when the land bridge was in place 10, 20,000 years ago. So there's a big difference between taking your own population. Jews were German citizens. Jews were Polish citizens. They were Russian citizens. And they were helping the war efforts. They fought in World War I. And many of them would have been happy to fight in World War II. But except for this insanity of racism and hatred that a small group of very sociopathic but bright individuals like Hitler and Goering and Goebbels and Himmler, these guys were pretty smart. Their IQs were 125 to 135. Most of them were educated men. But they came out of an era of physical abuse by their parents, of belief that the World War I was lost in part because of the Jews. Well, all this has been going on for centuries, this anti-Semitism. And what's I think is really fascinating is that Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, he's Jewish. He's a Russian Jew. So who knows? These things get a life of their own, and it doesn't make any sense what happens. But and we know the Russians like to fight. They like to fight. So how do you stop that? I don't know, Joe. I don't know. But if they use chemical weapons, what will our response be?
Well, it's here's an interesting thing to ponder, because they've used chemical weapons. I don't know if you remember. This is now I want to say circa 2002, but there was a terrorist incident in Beslan in a theater. They had taken it over and they were holding a bunch of hostages, and this went on for a while. This was a big, international story, that people following it. And eventually, the way that they solved it, quote unquote, is they just gassed the whole thing. They took out the terrorists and the hostages.
They used a short-acting nerve gas. Excuse me. And what the mistake that they made is that when they pulled the survivors out, because they got in and killed all the terrorists, when they pulled the survivors out of the theater, they laid them on their back, and so they all aspirated as they woke up. If they had just rolled them on their side, almost all of them would have survived. But they didn't know what to do. They were just rescue workers, and this is an undereducated population at that time on a number of items. But now, speaking of nerve gases, we've got sarin and soman and tabin, and these are organophosphates. See, you probably don't remember this because you're too young. You're a baby, but we used organophosphates as insecticides. And it was pretty much banned after 2000 in the home and after 2003 in the fields, although there is still some limited agricultural use of these agents. And organophosphates are poisons that affect your parasympathetic nervous system. They block the transmission of impulses from one nerve to another by interfering with the neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. So you have two big sides to your nervous system. You have the sensory and the conscious side, and then the autonomic side. The conscious side is that we know what we're doing and we tell our hands to pick up the coffee cup and that sort of thing. The autonomic nervous system works without our knowledge, without any conscious awareness of it. So that's things like adrenaline, noradrenaline, acetylcholine. So it's like sleeping and waking. You don't know you're waking up. Your body just wakes up. The autonomic nervous system decides you've slept long enough and it gets you up. Or your heart starts pounding when you see a really exciting movie, and you're not thinking, heart go faster. That's adrenaline coming out because your emotions of anxiety and fear, if it's a horror movie or if it's a military movie, you kick out adrenaline and you don't even know it. That's not something you have control over. So the autonomic nervous system is then divided into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic is the adrenaline-like stuff that revs you up, gets your heart beating faster, gets your muscles filled up with blood, gets you ready to run. That fight or flight reaction, as we call it in medicine, where you are scared, and so you either are going to fight back or you're going to run. Women are a little different. They'll more likely, if they have that reaction, they're more likely to crouch down and hide. And that's probably goes way back to when we were coming out of the savannas, and running was not a good thing if you were a woman, because the men were faster and they'd catch you. So we have that, and so the parasympathetic, we have this acetylcholine, and if you block that, then you have a very serious situation if it's a large enough quantity. We have an acronym called SLUDGE, which is salivation. You salivate from your mouth. lacrimation, your eyes tear, urination, you have incontinence, defecation, you're pooping and you can't help it. You've got gastrointestinal symptoms and cramping, and you also throw up. And it also paralyzes your muscles, so your skeletal muscles are not working. Now, we do have antidotes for that. Short-acting is atropine, which is an old-time drug that we've been using in medicine and cardiology for decades. And then we also have PAM, which is a longer-acting. The atropine will just temporarily stop the symptoms, and you just have to keep giving that until the organophosphates wear off. But the PAM actually reverses it, and that's another agent that we use, and we have that in the emergency room because we still have occasional agricultural and industrial poisonings from that. So speaking of that, I need a little bit more caffeine to see if I can poison myself. So let's take a quick break, Joe. We'll be right back. This is Dr. Bill, your Radio MD.
Clear.
Bill Harrington in Washington. The U.S. Navy is rushing to field its first hypersonic weapon in a race with Russia and China to develop the new class of weapons. The Navy could be installing it on a warship starting as soon as late next year. Hypersonic weapons travel at speeds akin to ballistic missiles, but are difficult to shoot down because of their maneuverability. The Russian military claimed yesterday to have used one against a target in Ukraine. Saudi-run state media says Yemen's Houthi rebels have unleashed a barrage of drones and missile strikes on Saudi Arabia today that targeted a liquefied natural gas plant, a water desalination plant, an oil facility, and a power station. Nobody was hurt. And a car is slammed at high speed into carnival revelers in a small town in southern Belgium today, killing 6 people, leaving 10 more badly injured. Terrorism is not expected. This is SRN News.
Dr. Bill for Bay Area Medical, located at 6399 38th Avenue North in St. Pete, 727-384-6411, 727-384-6411.
Talking to me, Doc?
Minor surgery. We provide quality health care in a warm and friendly atmosphere. We are multilingual, well-trained, and certified. Most American insurance and new patients accepted. Bay Area Medical, Home of Can Care, 727-384-6411, 727-384-6411. Dr. Bill here. With social distancing and sheltering in place, telemedicine is here. Bay Area Medical, Home of Can Care Clinic offers telemedicine for new and established patients. You can see me without an office visit. Schedule an appointment at 727-384-6411, 727-384-6411. When it's time for your appointment, type this web address into your cell phone or computer web browser, doxy.me/Bay Area Med. A cell phone works well and is all you really need. For computers, you need a web camera and speakers. We'll give you this address when you call for your appointment. We accept most insurances and travel insurances. Canadians and visitors, please call your travel insurance company for an authorization number prior to the visit. Copays and deductibles apply. Self-pay rates are available. Just ask. We accept credit cards, PayPal, and Stripe. 727-384-6411, 727-384-6411. Dr. Bill here. My friends at St. Pete MRI and Sleep Diagnostics are your best choice for state-of-the-art MRI, CT, and sleep studies. Quality unsurpassed. 25 years experience makes St. Pete MRI my go-to imaging center. Self-pay rates are competitive and out-of-pocket cost a fraction of a hospital. Conveniently accessible from both sides of the bay at 750 94th Avenue North, St. Pete, near the Gandy. 727-577-2220, 727-577-2220.
Before Bamboo HR, I feel like crying just thinking about it.
We were still handling everything via paper, and we literally had paper stacked.
It was all spreadsheets and like folders.
From the moment I started using it, I felt calmer.
As soon as we started using the Bamboo onboarding checklist, I mean, it was extremely easy.
Head count, turnover, years of service. There's just so many different reports that I use at different points in time. I'm totally set free to focus on the people, to focus on development, to focus on team dynamics.
It's freeing me up to do more of the stuff that actually matters in HR, which is interacting with people, learning from them, and then building stuff for them.
Everything is in this one place. I can't even imagine what it would be like without Bamboo HR.
We're Bamboo HR, and we'd love to set you free to do great work. Come try our award-winning all-in-one HR software for free with no strings attached. Visit bamboohr.com/HR for this free trial offer. That's bamboohr.com/HR.
Paid for by Freedom Law School.
Mark your calendars for the first weekend of April in Brandon, Florida. The biggest rally of 2022. Stand Up to Tyranny. Stand Up to Mandates. Featuring the biggest names in MAGA. Brandon, Florida. Purchase tickets at letsgobrandonrally.org.
When it comes to servicing your vehicle, Moss Nissan is simply the best around. You should be able to have your vehicle serviced according to your schedule, so we offer extended service hours and pickup and drop-off services. Moss Nissan, whatever it takes.
AM 860, The Answer. Online at theanswertampa.com.
Odyssey.
Here is your exclusive AccuWeather forecast.
Partly sunny, humid for today, high 85. Tonight, clear to partly cloudy, low 70. Tomorrow, sunshine and some clouds, a high 83, low 68. Clouds and sunshine, less humid Sunday, the high 80, and partly sunny for Monday, high 84. That's your AccuWeather forecast. I'm Andy Robb.
All right, Doc, here we go.
860, The Answer.
And I'm back. This is Dr. Bill, your radio MD. Got Joe with me today. Ken's wife is under the weather, so he's helping her out. And if you're watching the streaming on YouTube or Facebook, I put up a picture of some shells that have chemical weapons in it. I think it's mustard gas that we had stored out in Arizona or somewhere. I don't know if we still have those. Getting rid of all this stuff is not easy, Joe. Takes time and effort and infrastructure to do it. And so, but at any rate, that's another story. So we've talked a little bit about that and a little bit about nuclear fallout. And will we survive a nuclear attack? I think so. I mean, unless you're in the blast zone, especially if it's a hydrogen bomb, you should be able to survive it. You just got to get away from it as fast as you can and wash off and take the appropriate precautions, and we'll tell you all about that if it happens. Dr. Bill will be here with you. I don't think it'll happen. We talked about the Monroe Doctrine and how it applies here, and this doesn't really have anything to do with whether or not we intervene in wars in Europe. We are not interested in colonizing the world. We're interested in making the world safe for democracy, and especially for our style of democracy. So that's important. And then we talked a little about the Mariupol battle and the Azov Brigade, the battalion that is defending Mariupol, and they're actually part of the Ukrainian army now. They were started as a paramilitary group and were incorporated into the military by the Ukrainian parliament after they became independent of the Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact. And then we just heard that the Russians claim they used a hypersonic weapon in the Ukraine on one of the towns. And I see where they're encircling Kyiv, and they think that when they get within about 15 miles, they'll be in firing range, and they'll have it completely encircled with their weapons. So I don't know what's going to happen there. Will they destroy us? I mean, will they destroy the Ukrainians? I don't know. I mean, why would they want to kill the whole Ukrainian population? Doesn't make any sense to me, Joe. I have no idea. But that's the way it is. So now we're back to the virus again, Joe. The CDC and Fauci are warning that Americans could face another surge as more variants come along and more lockdowns and spread of a new COVID variant. But I got to tell you, the fourth shot now is recommended. And there was a study that just came out last week that showed the effectiveness of 3 and then 4. And if you've had at least 3 doses, you're not likely to end up in the hospital or very sick with the Omicron or the Delta or any other of the variants so far that we've identified. The BA2, we're still looking at that. However, the 4th dose is recommended, especially for people who are at high risk. I would say 4 to 6 months after your 3rd dose, and we've got that in the office, so you can come in 727-384-6411, 727-384-6411, and this article was in the New England Journal just a couple of days ago. The efficacy of a fourth dose of COVID-19, the messenger RNA vaccine against the Omicron. The people who had a fourth dose, even if they got the Omicron, they were basically asymptomatic. So it really does work, and I can only encourage everybody to be vigilant and to take care of themselves. And I'm still meeting people who think that this is some kind of a plot, or it's going to alter their genetics or interfere with the birth of their babies and all this kind of nonsense. And there's just no evidence of that. This mRNA vaccine that Pfizer and Moderna have produced, they're miraculous. It's just miraculous, especially for an old goat like me, Joe. So we don't want me to die, do we?
Well, you're fairly miraculous in your own right.
I rode my bike from home to work, so it was from Gulfport up to 38th Avenue North in St. Pete. And then I rode back home yesterday again because I didn't have my car, so I only had one vehicle, and that was my bicycle. So I did 10 miles yesterday. That's not bad.
10 miles. That's exactly 10 more than I did. So, there you go.
Yeah, but you run around the studio and the station, and you do more work. You burn up more calories in an hour than I do in a day.
There is that. There's plenty enough to go around, that's for sure.
And I'll never forget when, which hurricane was it that came through, and I'd drop out of the station and I did some live stuff with with some of the guys, and then you and I were putting up plywood across the glass out front. And you remember that?
Now, I have to clarify a couple of things about this. First of all, we're talking about Hurricane Irma, right? So that was the big storm that was, look, we here in Florida, we're often inundated with, this storm is going to, destroy your entire, community, and then most of them don't. Irma was actually pretty serious. So to your point, we had to, we took precautions here. We boarded up the studio. And you need to know that this man, Dr. Bill, came, and we weren't recording anything. You just showed up. You just showed up here at the radio station saying, hey, can I help? And it's important to point out here that you had just had throat surgery like a week or so earlier, and you were in a position where you couldn't move your head up or else you could rip the stitches out. And yet there you were helping me put these boards up on the side of the building. It was one of the, I don't know if this is a appropriate PC term, but still manliest things that I've ever saw, because it was here is somebody that's got a legitimate health reason, and yet without even being prompted comes to the studio to help. I never forgot that. I never will forget that. That was super duper cool.
I'd forgotten that I'd had surgery a week before.
Yeah, you still had the neck all wrapped up and everything. I'm like, Doc, are you okay? Oh, I'm okay. I just can't look up and I'll be fine. And yet we're putting these boards up on the wall.
Hey, we did it though. We got them up.
That's right.
And remember, we were running around looking for materials and equipment and another drill, and oh my gosh, it was something. If you've never been to a radio station, you think it's a highly organized, well laid out situation, and the studios for the most part are, but everything else, oh my God, it's like my workshop. There's bins with nails and screws and drawers with tools, and of course nothing's labeled properly because you're on the fly, so you're moving fast, and you use a drill and you put it in another drawer and you forget, and so then we're opening things up and going through everything. But it was a lot of fun, actually. I enjoy that sort of thing. It keeps me busy.
It all worked out. And we didn't suffer any damage, and we exercised safety and all that stuff. But you're right. We for what we do on a regular basis, we have everything nice and organized and it's in place. But when you get into a position where, okay, now all of a sudden we have to become builders, yeah, we have the stuff, but it may not necessarily be in the most organized place. So it all worked out. And like you say, it ultimately wasn't the worst time in the world when we were getting all that done. And the most important thing is that we all made it through, and everything was cool.
Yes, it was cool, and we did a lot of good there, and we were on the radio. And I guess we're a hurricane hole here in the Tampa Bay area because that stupid storm, it went around Tampa Bay. It went inland, went around Tampa Bay, and then came back out north of us into the Caribbean. I mean, into the Gulf of Mexico. Can you believe that? How many times does that happen? How lucky are we that we didn't get whacked?
Yep, there was a couple of billboards that got wrecked, and some business signs, but otherwise, yeah, it really went all the way around us, and that was in particular that was a uniquely people that aren't from Florida and don't really know anything about this area. Oftentimes they're not shy about offering their opinions about the type of people and the type of place that this is. But that whole experience was really eye-opening to me from the standpoint of you got people from everywhere in the world that live here. Yet when that was going on, it was more neighborly than any experience that I had ever been through. People were helping each other. The people were helping people they didn't know. People were going out of their way, taking their own time to assist, elderly and so. And I have to, oftentimes we are critical of the government for a variety of very good reasons, but I will say that I had the opportunity to go to the emergency operations center a couple months after, and maybe it was only a month after that it all went down. And you don't realize this necessarily if you're not in it, but I got to tell you, there was some seriously heroic work done by the people that worked at the county level and the state level to transport people to the shelters, to make sure that they, had all the supplies that they need. And this was something that, because since the entire state was basically, on watch, one of the points they made is that if you're in a given county, let's say you're in Hillsborough County and you need supplies, well, you may be able to go to Pasco County and say, hey, can you guys help us out with something, or go to Hernando or whatever. Well, every county, was completely maxed out. So there was a lot of really, really fine public service work that was done during that a lot of people don't realize. But, kudos to, because, I mean, they ended up transporting, I forget the number. It was way over 100,000 people from, where they were to where they could be safe. And, hats off to them. It was, and yeah, like you say, it ultimately ended up, we were okay. Yep. And it also probably, because, we're going to be coming up on hurricane season here. It's, every year it's a scheduled event. Yep. And I'll just say this. If you get the sense that a hurricane's coming and you want to leave, the time to do it is basically like the moment that you hear that something is forming off the coast. Because once you get into the cycle, leaving is not really an option. There were a lot of people that ended up riding out that storm on the freeway because they decided to leave too late. And then they had a hard time getting back. I knew somebody that was stuck in Georgia for about a week afterwards because there wasn't gas to get back to Florida.
And it took, one of my friends took off for Atlanta, and he didn't get to Atlanta till the storm had already passed.
Yep.
It was like a 24-hour drive. The other people that we have to thank are the power companies. I mean, power trucks from all over the United States were in our area, and they do that with every big storm and disaster. They come from all over the country because our power company can't handle all of the downed lines and all of the transformers that have blown up. And one of the next to my office, there's a big Duke Energy office building and substation, and that's where the guys sit at the computer, and they control the shifting of power from one grid to another for the whole state of Florida for Duke. And so some of the guys that worked there, when Duke took over and they started hiring, they didn't have anywhere to stay, so I had some empty space in my office building, and I said, yeah, sure, you can stay here. And so I rented them some space. And one of the guys whose mother also rents from me, he was working. And I said, how bad was it? He said, Doc, we have 10 major lines coming into Pinellas County, major electrical lines from, the plants up north and wherever else they are, from the power plants. He said 8 of the 10 major trunk lines were down. We were down to 2 lines in Pinellas County. So, I mean, we could have been without electricity for days or even weeks with just a little bit more storm. And these guys, they work like crazy to get these lines back up, and it's dangerous work too.
And I think that it's a really good point that you talked a little bit earlier about Russia, where you get outside of the major city and it's basically gravel roads and hovels, and that's what they're still living through. Well, I think we take for granted that we do have this very complex infrastructure and people that are willing to come to the rescue whenever something like that happens, not just in Florida, but I mean all around the country. You have people that kind of deploy on the scene and do things like restore power lines or restore, roadways, bridges, and so forth. That whatever it is that happens, it needs to be repaired. We're pretty blessed and fortunate in America that we do have people and an infrastructure and a network that will come to the aid and assist whenever one of us has a need. And when I say one of us, I mean a state or a city or something. We do tend to descend on it from the rest of the country to help out, and that's a pretty special thing.
Well, more importantly than that, because most societies, people help each other, but we have so much ability. I mean,
that's really what I mean.
You go down to Puerto Rico after one of the storms, and there's power trucks. There's power companies with their trucks down there from Minnesota. And so you got to get them over there, of course, on a boat or a ferry. I mean, we have so much ability, and we're so blessed. Anybody who says that we're a bad nation is just way off. And look at the amount of assistance we're sending into Poland to help out the Ukrainian refugees, and look at the assistance we're sending in terms of military equipment and shields and vest and anti-tank and anti-air defenses. I mean, we're doing a lot. I think we should do more, but we certainly are doing a lot, and we do a lot around the world for everybody. And as I've said before, everywhere I go in the world, people are so grateful, and they all want to speak English, and they all want to make sure that America's still involved all around the world, Joe, everywhere we go. It's even in China. It just amazes me how well we are thought of and how well respected we are throughout most of the world.
Yeah, we have our problems, we have our challenges, but we also have our strengths.
And the world counts on us to keep things in order and not to let thugs like Putin and his gang run over Eastern Europe again. I mean, this is part of what we are supposed to do as the big free power on the block. That's part of what we do.
3 minutes.
And I don't know how to get that through to people. And some people say, well, it's none of our business. Let's not get involved in this war in the Ukraine. This is how World War I and World War II started. We wouldn't get involved until late. You got to come in early. You got to punch the bully in the nose. You got to tell them, no, you can't do that. Go back home to mommy. And, a small economy and a second-class military like Russia, it really, unless they used nuclears and weapons of mass destruction, it really wouldn't be a fight. We'd push them off the field pretty quickly.
And a power like that, they're going to go either until they win or they lose.
Yeah.
Like they're not just going to stop.
No,
is the point?
They're not going to stop. No, they're not going to stop, and that's the unfortunate part of it. And it's like Hitler. He wouldn't let his troops retreat. He said you have to stay and fight. And so at Stalingrad, 250,000 men were taken prisoner, and I think maybe 5,000 got back home after World War II. So the Russians marched them off and worked them to death in Siberia. Oh well, what are you going to do? So, but you got to understand that there's more to warfare than just people beating each other up. There's the long-term consequences of allowing a thug, an oligarchy like Russia to control parts of Europe again. After we dismantled all that, I mean, that's why we fought the Cold War. So here we go again. Oh my God, we got to go through this a whole nother time, Joe? This is ridiculous. Well, we're getting close to the end of the show here, so let me push the practice a little bit. We do have the COVID vaccine. And we've got the Pfizer and the Moderna. And we've also got the rapid PCR, and we've got the rapid antigen test if you need a COVID test. If you're going on a trip or you just want to know, come on in, 727-384-6411, 727-384-6411. And, you know, Joe, we've got a full-service office, and we do telemed, too. So come on in.
I'm a patient myself, so I fully endorse it.
Well, thank God you're there, because without you, I'd be broke.
I know. I remind you of that every time I'm there, too.
So how much time we got left?
You have got almost 20 big seconds. Make them count.
Oh, my God. You know, I love you guys so much. Doing this show is just so much fun. And Joe, I really appreciate you being here with me. And I miss Ken, but Joe is wonderful, too. And I am Dr. Bill, your radio MD. I want you guys to come back next week. We'll get the mug giveaway going again. Joe and I forgot about that today. I am Dr. Bill, your radio MD.
To Dr. Bill, your radio MD.
You nailed the postdoc.
Sunday morning at 9 for more insight, information, provocation, and fun. Dr. Bill Handelman practices in St. Petersburg, Florida at Bay Area Medical Care Clinic, 6399 38th Avenue North. For your convenience, telemedicine appointments are available. Call his office today at 727-384-6411. That's 727-384-6411. Or visit his website at cancareclinic.com.